Hey everyone, it's Brandy from Brandy Burrow Astrology, back with Ellie Adams at Let's F with Astrology and Saturn Season Astrology, back to discuss another forensic astrology case. Ellie, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Hello, everyone.
So today we're gonna kind of do a part one, part two thing again, right?
Yes.
Cool. So I'm taking kind of the part one of the murders that were committed by the Manson family. I know, but the astrology really on this one. So I'm taking what is referred to as the Tate murders, Sharon Tate and the occupants of her house that evening, and we'll go over everyone's name, but I'm taking that one, and you can go over to Ellie's channel where you'll find the LaBianca murders that happened the next evening.
Yes, they will be there.
Yes, part one, part two. I love kind of doubling up on these and having a continuation. It just gives so much content. And these are really interesting. So the Tate murders happens August 9th, 1969, right after midnight. So this one's kind of weird because they were targeted, but they weren't. Basically, the house was targeted. Yeah. So Charles Manson and the Manson family, and I'm not even gonna worry about the names of these people because they're all disgusting. So I'm just gonna group them together as the Manson family. Charles Manson is into music, trying to get a music career going. I've heard his stuff through documentaries. He sucked. But he was following the Beach Boys and was friends with some of them. And then the Beach Boys record producer, Melcher, he was trying to get him to sign a recording contract with him. Terry Melcher declined. Well, the house where the Tate murders happened is where Terry Melcher was living a few months prior. Fun fact, Terry Melcher is also Doris Day's son. So, yeah, all these famous connections. And I believe, going from memory, his girlfriend was Candace Bergman at the time. Is that her name?
Okay.
Anyway, they were living there. Now, Charles Manson knew they were not living there any longer, but he still was going to target the house and the people staying there. I think he did know Sharon Tate was there. So he gave orders to his followers to go to this house and commit what's quoted as him saying the most gruesome murders you can do, basically. And so that's how these people were targeted, was just the house. Yeah. And this was in LA. This was on Celio Drive. So the victims are movie actress Sharon Tate and her unborn son. She was 8.5 months pregnant, almost ready to give birth. Her friend, former boyfriend, Jay Sebring, who was a celebrity hairstylist. And then so Sharon Tate's married to Roman Polanski. He was out of town. He was out of the country working on a movie. His friend, Wojciech Frykowski, was staying there that night with his girlfriend, Abigail Folger, heiress to Folger's Coffee. And then there is a caretaker who I guess lives on the grounds, has a guest house. And his name is William Garretson. He survives because he was in the house asleep. His friend, Stephen Parent, was leaving around the time the Manson family arrived, and he ended up being a victim too. So there's 5 victims, 6 counting the unborn child. So 6 victims here. That's just a little background. So I got the charts of when everyone arrives home. So the night before, because this happens right around midnight, Sharon Tate and everyone that was staying at her house had gone out to dinner, and they leave and arrive home around 10:30. So do we want to see that chart?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go. And I'm sorry you can't see all the title because I actually just saved this as an image instead of a PDF. But this is the time they arrive home, around 10:30 on August 8th. So we got Aries rising here on the ascendant. So on this chart, victims are going to be ruled by Mars sitting there in the 8th house. So not a great placement.
No, it's not. That was one of the first things that stood out to me too. Also, the ruler of the seventh house in the third quincunx, it's quincunx Mars, Venus quincunx Mars, kind of points to like them not knowing the perpetrators, like they're, you know what, like there's some sort of disconnect.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I believe he had been to this house before and Sharon Tate had answered the door. But yeah, there's not a connection. They don't know each other. It's more like he knows who's there. Sharon Tate and friends do not know Charles Manson or any of these people.
Yeah.
Yeah, great observation. And you know, interesting on the descendant where we find perpetrators or the murderers here in Libra, in a sign that we see when there's more than one.
Yep. And there were, how many of them were there? Were there 5?
You know, I should have wrote it down. I think there were 5. I think multiple. Yeah. I know this is like one of these cases where I really had a hard time just even writing down facts about Charles Manson. You know what I mean? Because I wanted to like just kind of focus on.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure. There were multiple, I think 4 to 5 people.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the Libra descendant makes sense.
Yeah. Makes sense. And it's kind of interesting. They're called Manson family, right?
Cancer. That Venus in Cancer. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're in the sign of Cancer, like so literal here, you know?
Yeah.
And right by the moon, which would also co-rule the victims here.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in that 3rd house. And, you know, this is around the time they're probably combing the area, kind of getting set up, casing, if you will.
At the very least in their car going that way.
Yeah. Yes. And here's the creepy thing. That 6th house,
Yeah.
You know, we got a couple signs going on in there. We got Pluto and Virgo, and then we got Uranus and Jupiter and Libra, but they're all right there in the 6th house. That's so stalker-ish and wild.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. It's there's something especially with like that 8th house having Scorpio on the cusp. Mm-hmm. There's something that kind of with that Pluto involved in that. It does feel kind of,
as we say, things are set in motion. Yeah. And what I don't like about this chart is that Saturn sitting there on the 1st house on the victim's turf, you know, and it's in a sign like Taurus. You know, they were all like, when the Manson family broke into the house, they were all like in bed, laying on the couch, sleeping, like they were settled in. Yeah.
Not seeing it coming at all.
Here's the thing that kind of stands out in these charts to me, because you have the killers represented by Venus in Cancer. But yet Charles Manson is the one that's putting them up to it. He's not there doing any of the work. He puts them up to it.
He's a pussy.
He is a pussy.
I'm sorry. That's like, seriously, like, not that him having the notoriety that he has when he did, it just makes no sense to me. He put these young kids up to this, and I know that they chose to, you know, I'm not saying they're not to blame, they are, but you know, the sort of, it seems like some people hold him up on this pedestal, which is really sick as it is, but
yeah, it is sick.
He didn't, drives me crazy.
You know, he's a cult leader. Yeah, he's gross. Yeah, but you know, Venus is making this square. It's separating, but it's making the square to Jupiter, where you would find kind of a religious, I hate to use the word religious, but it's kind of what we're dealing with here, like a cult.
Yeah. And then there's, I mean, certainly there can be like dogmatic or religious-y things with cults, you know, certain ways of being, you know,
and control, you know, and it's interesting though that their ruler is making that aspect to Jupiter. So it really is painting the picture of what's going on here and who's behind it. And
It does.
Another thing that's interesting about this is that Venus moon conjunction in Cancer, going back to that. You know, one of the things that the Tate murders is, I guess one of the most, what am I trying to say here? One of the most well-known things, and what stood out and what made it so shocking was the fact that they did murder Sharon Tate, who was 8.5 months pregnant. And the Manson family testified that she, you know, was just pleading with them to not kill her, to let her have her baby first, then they could kill her, you know. And you know, to have the moon and Venus and Cancer in the sign of motherhood and children.
Yeah, it I don't want to say that it fits, but it definitely makes sense. Saying it fits sounds like it gives it a better connotation than what I mean, but it definitely makes sense.
It describes what's happening here, and yeah, definitely. Is there anything else about this chart? You know, we also got the sun in the 5th house. I guess we could talk about children too.
Yeah, the 5th house has Leo on the cusp too, so it's got its, you know, its ruler in that house. Definitely seems like it would shine a light on the child aspect, like what you were talking about.
Right. It's very likely that baby would have been a Leo had he been born. Very likely. She was pretty close. Kind of.
That's possible, yeah.
Interesting kind of thing going on there. But yeah, this is the time they get home. Now, I did pull a chart because it was really interesting that someone nearby reported, you know, this was after the fact, once police were investigating, someone nearby reported hearing screams around 12:40. So I pulled a chart for that because that's a pretty good indication of that's when
stuff was going on.
Yeah. Now, little backstory, Stephen Parent, who again is the friend of William Garretson, the caretaker who was leaving, he was the first one to be killed from what I understand, because he was leaving in the car and he was attacked in the car and killed.
Yes, that's how I always understood it too.
And then it sounds like right after that is when everyone else.
All hell broke loose.
Yeah. And it makes sense on this chart because, you know, you got Gemini on the ascendant, multiple victims.
Yes. In the 4th, Mercury in the 4th.
Yeah.
So they're at home.
They're at home. And this is also the place of endings. And you got Mercury also ruling the 5th house of children too, indicating a child victim as well. Yeah. Now, this time, if we're following the rulers from the previous chart, now that we got the victim's previous ruler of Mars in the 7th house, it's interesting how things have turned, because this is now like, oh, you're on our turf, even though they're at home or at, you know, Sharon's home and invited to be there. But, and there's indications that some of these victims try to run, like Abigail Folger. She tried to leave and flee, and they still ran after her and caught her.
From what I understand, she almost got away.
She was close. Like she ran out.
Like she had almost hit like she was almost clear, it seemed like.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting how, like, it almost feels like, okay, they're at their home, but they're now on the perpetrator's turf, like they can't escape them.
Yeah, by this point they had definitely, like, the perpetrators had taken it over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You now got Saturn in the 12th and another, you know, house that represents death and being trapped. Not being able to leave. Now, what disturbs me about this chart is that you got that Pluto, Uranus, Jupiter group now in the 5th house.
Enjoyment.
Yeah.
This was enjoyable for those fuckheads.
Sick. Yeah, they were fine. They had some passion in this, you know, and were finding enjoyment. Yeah, I don't know how else you can say it, but definitely showing up in the astrology here. Now, it's interesting. I did try to look up some fixed stars here. There was one on 1 degree Sagittarius, which is the descendant where we'd find the killers. And let's see, let me go back to it. Not going to pronounce the name because, as usual, I don't know the names of fixed stars. They're very, very ancient names that I can't pronounce. But we have a fixed star there, and it represents dangerous passions.
Huh. Dangerous passions.
Yeah. And we got Neptune so close to that descendant. More of that, you know, kind of religious or delusion.
Yeah, fogged over spiritual shit or whatever, or you know, whatever. Maybe I know that when you think of like cults, it's not really spiritual, but they're, you know, to them it could be.
Yeah. Well, you know, like later on, after Charles Manson is in prison, he would say he was Jesus Christ. Like he had some crazy religious views.
Yeah. He's something. He was something else. He's something else.
And you see these on these charts, how there is some kind of control here, you know, whether it's religion or whether it's just their delusion, you know. But you got like Neptune, like I said, you got the Venus squaring Jupiter. You got the North Node in Pisces now in the charts in the 11th house of groups of people. It's just it's so crazy that they thought there was a purpose to this.
And that Neptune trines it, which kind of, I don't know, feels like it might add a little something.
Yeah. Is there anything that stands out about these charts to you? This one's, it's not a similar chart. You know, we do shift the ascendant, which we're going into multiple victims now, but anything else that stands out that we should point out?
The main thing that I noticed was it seeming like it was on the like, even though the perpetrators were on their turf, it seemed like they were on the perpetrator's turf. Yeah. That really did stand out. And the enjoyment, which is just fucking gross. The enjoyment of the entire thing. But you know, even here with Virgo on the cusp of the 5th house, you know, the precision. Now, the way that they did this, apparently Charles Manson thought it was very sloppy. But the precise reason why they even did any of this in the first place is his idea of helter-skelter. That, you know, there is, I don't know. I wonder if that could be, I don't know.
By the way, I did wear my Paul McCartney shirt, but there was no planning intended here, like with the Helter Skelter Beatles song. I didn't even plan that, so I'm not sick. I love Paul McCartney every day, and it just happened to be the day I wore a shirt, so that was not planned.
Well, I think anybody that knows you knows that you love Paul McCartney and the Beatles, and you know. Yeah. I love the Beatles too, so I mean, and the White Album, I've got to say the White Album is one of my favorites, but this motherfucker took the White Album and did something ridiculous with it. Yeah. So yeah, you know, the other thing in this chart, you know, you do have the Venus Moon conjunction that we were kind of following in the previous chart. Now in the 2nd house, where we get abduction or another clue of like taking over. Yes. Yeah. And it is, Now, the other chart I have with this case is when they're found, which was around, I believe, 8:33 a.m. Yes. Yeah, on August 9th. Yes. And the way they were found, so the caretaker was still in the guest home. He didn't know this had happened. Their housekeeper, who I think she was really close with Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski and worked really well with them. She arrives to work and finds this horrific scene. Horrific, because you have Stephen Parent in the car, kind of, I guess, towards the entrance. You have some victims outside. I think at least 2 victims outside. And I mean, and I'm not going into the details, but basically these victims were
They were all stabbed. Some of them were shot. Some were stabbed multiple times. This is a really gruesome scene. She walks into this, and of course, inside is a couple more victims. So she walks into the scene. Unfortunately, William Garretson, the caretaker, was arrested at the scene, and he describes really horrible questioning from the police trying to get him to confess to all this. Poor guy, he had no idea what was happening.
Yeah, and I mean, really could have. I mean, that's traumatic all on its own, but he could have even been a victim if he, you know what I mean? Which is a whole other level of like trauma.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that he escaped. You know, he did say that he heard some commotion and like he thought he heard someone trying to open the door to the guest house, but it was locked. But he kind of passed it off like he didn't, you know.
Yeah.
I gotta admit, I've been in bed late at night and heard sounds around the house and been like, I don't know what that is. Keep going.
Yeah, totally. I'll just ignore it. And I mean, he probably knew that they had like they had guests, and you know, so he might have just thought they were having a good time. What, you know, whatever, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, now it's 8:33. The housekeeper walks upon this, sees what's happened, you know, immediately calls police. And so this is a chart for when this happens. You now have Saturn, the bodies in the 8th house of death. That kind of makes sense. What's interesting is that you got the Venus moon, you know, in the 10th house now, you know, more visible.
Yeah. This totally makes sense for when they were found.
They were found. And it makes sense for kind of the headline of the news story that really, I mean, all these victims were important people, but, you know, Sharon Tate and her unborn baby being killed was really like the significant headline about this.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, that's always sad when you hear about something like that, like somebody that's about to have a baby and they die, but in the manner in which.
Oh, violent. I mean, violent, horrible, terrible. So, you know, if we're going to follow the rulers, we now got from the previous chart, we got that Mars in the 3rd house, which, we were seeing that in the 8th house before. Now we got it in the 3rd house. Kind of curious. And we'll kind of maybe go into some of this in part 2, but, you know, obviously Charles Manson and them still kind of in the area.
Yeah, I was going to say, it kind of shows on the move.
On the move.
On the move. Yeah. And then you got all that other, that threesome, foursome in the first.
It was interesting, even if we want to start over with this chart and kind of pick the rulers of this chart, like the victims being Mercury and Virgo, they're in the 12th house of death. You know, you got the new ruler of the murderers and Pisces, a double-bodied sign, so multiple traders here, you know, in Jupiter and Libra in the first. That Jupiter also being back to some sort of group, some sort of like cult. I'm just gonna use the word cult. That's what they are.
Yeah. And even right, you know, next to Uranus, which you can also tie with groups and weird shit. Shit. Sometimes the weird shit is good, not in this case. Particular case. Yeah.
Now, horrible case, but you know, the murderers were found and tried, and there was justice here. So, you know, that's one of these things, looking at a case like this where like, we know who did. It's not a cold case, but it's kind of interesting that the astrology follows the story, reflects the story. It's a good forensic astrology example to look at.
Yeah, it is. It really is. It really is a good one. It is.
Yeah. I'm going to stop share. Any like final thoughts about this? You know, what would have been good for William Garretson if forensic astrology was used by police at the time? It would have been, you know, good to like kind of clue them into like, hey, no, we're looking at some groups of people, you know, or some crazies here. Because, you know, they did not stop with this. They went the next night and
continued on their reign of terror.
What's that?
continued on their reign of terror.
Yeah, another horrendous murder the following night. So yeah, it's just an example of how forensic astrology works and what it can tell you. So I'm just glad these fuckers were caught.
I am too. I am too, because people like that don't need to be roaming free in society.
Yeah,
Like,
it's kind of interesting. So I don't know how many documentaries I've seen about these people. You know, the ones who committed these murders, they went to prison. Now, there's some of the Manson family, though, who ended up serving prison time for other crimes like robbery, and I don't know, they're just bad people. They did all sorts of shit. But what I found interesting is that the members who ended up getting out of prison, or who did not go to prison, ended up finding like religion and getting extremely religious.
well, it could show some, you know, I do think that there is like psychologically, like there could psychologically, even astrologically, and it, you know, there can be indicators that somebody needs something, right? Whether that's a cult or or religion, or, you know, they need,
or they need to be, it's not going to be popular with everybody, but need to be controlled in some way.
Yes. Yeah. And those are, I mean, those are things that you can kind of see in somebody's chart, you know, or they can go that way. Maybe not that they always have to go that way, but that they could, you know. Yeah.
And, you know, Charles Manson's chart is available online with a quick search.
Yeah, I'm not going to show it on mine either. It's, you know, that little fucker, because wasn't he's like 5'2", right? He's like my height.
He's little. I'm sorry, I'm not saying you're little, Ellie.
No, I am little, but you know, this
yeah,
he was little, you know, for a dude, he was little.
This little rat, and he had already served like prison time for other things. Like, he had children out there he wasn't taking care of. Like, I can just like character assassinate this guy all day long.
No,
like, nothing redeeming about him, you know.
Absolutely nothing redeeming about him.
It's interesting how he's able to get these people together and convince them to do such horrendous stuff. But
yeah, it's just like what's the word? A perfect storm of the personalities, I suppose.
Yeah,
coming together.
Yeah. I mean, this is an old case. This happened, I'd have to do the math. How were we at? 54 years ago? I think so. Yeah. Still extremely sad, though. Still, with, even though this case happened a long time ago, still putting my sympathy out there to all these families. I know, like, Sharon Tate's sister still really advocates. You know, she probably wouldn't approve of this. Like, she doesn't like people using the story, but I mean, I think it's just an interesting case to use the forensic astrology with, just to show how it works, and that's the angle I'm coming from. So but yeah, extremely sad. In saying that, Ellie, where can everybody find you?
You can find me on YouTube at Let's Up with Astrology, on Instagram at Saturn Season Astrology, and on my website, which is SaturnSeason.com. And where can everybody find you?
BrandyBurrowAstrology.com, where I do astrology and tarot readings, and Brandy Burrow Astrology on YouTube and Instagram.
Very good.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Ellie. And then go to Ellie's channel for part 2, where she'll discuss me and her.
Yes, it won't just be me. You won't just, it's not like you're just going to be sitting there and I'm going to be doing all of the time.
I might. Okay. You might have a bunch of interesting things to say. No, go to Ellie's channel to watch part 2 of the LaBianca murders, the murders that happened the following night.
Yes.
All right. Till next time. Thanks, guys.
Till next time.